So alright guys, in today's video I'm going to be showing off a project that is both really cool and really cursed all at the same time. Well, with that said, if you read the title of the video, you already know what it is I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about the BlueRetro firmware made by the user Darth Cloud. Now this firmware turns any ESP32 into a Bluetooth controller adapter for pretty much a wide range of consoles. There's even modded firmware out there to allow you to hook this up to another dev board entirely and use it on the original Xbox, which is something I plan to do here sometime in the future. But for simplicity's sake, I'm only going to be covering how to set this up with the N64. Now before you ask, yes, you can get official ESP32 based BlueRetro firmware dongles. These are exactly the same thing we're going to be building, except in the case of those, you can only have one in your port at a time. So if you want 4 players, you're going to need 4 of them, and that can cost a pretty penny. While if you go the DIY route like I did here, you could plug in 4 controller ports with 1 module and pair as many remotes as you want to it. Now I'll get more into depth with what kind of remotes are supported towards the end of the video, as well as why this is unique and different compared to other third-party options that are available. But with that said, what do we need to get started? First of all, you're going to need an N64, an N64 plug, and an ESP32. You're also, of course, going to need a computer and a cable to flash the firmware to the ESP32. With that said, I'm going to be using Linux, but the project does have instructions for Windows users, although primarily they are just about the same. So with that said, if you're on Linux, this video is going to be good for you. However, if you are not, maybe sometime in the future I can make a video for this for Windows users, but for the time being, I'm going to push forward and assume that you have Linux. Now the first thing we need to do is download a tool, and they recommend downloading a script as well with the tool to make the job easier, but their script does not work for me, so we're just going to use the basic tool and type in our own command. I'll have the commands down below if you want to just copy and paste them. But the first thing we need to install is ESP-Tool. You can get this by typing in sudo apt-get install ESP-Tool, or you could type in sudo pacman-s ESP-Tool. In my case, since I'm on Arch Linux, I'm going to be using Pacman. Now the package is not very big, so just accept it, hit yes, and install. With that said, we are actually almost done. All that's left now is to download the firmware. You can get the firmware on the Github page here, but to simplify this video, if you want to, I'll have the same exact firmware in my own backup in the description down below. So all you'd have to do is extract it. You'll have these few files here and some instructions. But if you don't want to do that, just look on the Github page till you find the hardware 1 revision zip. But with that said, I'm just going to assume you downloaded my personal backup of this project. And don't worry, if you download my personal backup, you can actually update your ESP32 online after getting this flashed over. So no matter how out of date my particular backup gets, it should still receive updates and work just as well. So now that I have my folder here with the files extracted, I'm going to close this terminal and open a new terminal up here, just by right-clicking the folder location. After that, I'm going to open the instructions and read my commands. What we need to do is actually not that difficult. First things first, we need to plug in our ESP32 into the computer. Now that I'm plugged in, all I have to do is copy and paste the command in step 2 into my terminal. I'm going to use the right buttons here. And if we're lucky, it should just show up here in the list of hardware available. What I recommend doing is taking note of what you think it is, unplugging it, and running that command again. As you can see, I unplugged the hardware and it is now saying that it is disconnected. So I'm going to plug it back in, clear my terminal, and run that command one more time. So as you can see, our device is attached on TTY USB 00. Or just 0, I mean. That is good, because my command can pretty much be copied and pasted. However, if your device is showing on a different port, be sure to change the port here from TTY to whatever your device is listed as. In my case, that is the same name, so I'm just going to copy this command, close the instructions, and while making sure we're still in the same terminal that is opened in the same folder and directory, I'm going to paste that command and hit enter. And just like that, it will start flashing over. And don't worry if you have a firmware already on your ESP32, this should just take care of it and erase it and write our new firmware right to the device. Now what I did is kind of detrimental because I didn't back up any of my save pack games, so if you use the memory pack toggle that is in the actual web interface to, have memory packs emulated through your controller, just keep that in mind. If you wipe your device, make sure to make a backup of your saves or they're gone. But yeah, that is it. How about we go and try to open this up on a web browser. Now I said a web browser, however your web browser must support Bluetooth communication. In my case on Linux, Firefox does not. So I'm going to do a little bit of a workaround here and pull up my phone screen on the computer, and we're just going to look at the web interface from my phone. So alright, sorry about that. That took me an incredibly long and stupid amount of time to cast my phone screen to the computer, but once you got the web interface open up, all you have to do is connect to it. So you can connect to it pretty much through any of the menus, I believe. If I just click on this, it should say, yeah, connect BlueRetro. So what we need to do is, if you want to actually have a memory pack on your N64, in my case, I want to be able to save my games to my BlueRetro, and that way I could take it with me, plug it in someone else's N64 if I want to. So all I got to do is click on that, click on connect, allow Bluetooth access, click on the device, and hit pair. If you're wondering why this menu pops up, it pops up if you have no controllers connected. So if you're trying to connect to your BlueRetro and you have a controller connected, be sure to turn the controller off first. But yeah, we're almost done. All I have to do is select which memory pack I want. You can actually have 4 separate memory packs, so if you want to have 4 different cards to save your games or you don't have enough space, you could easily divide up and go into a different one. But I'm just going to set up memory pack 1 by clicking on Format. That will begin to erase and make us a new memory pack for our BlueRetro emulated controller. Pretty much after this, there's nothing much more you have to configure in here, although if you have a specific game and you feel like the controller sensitivity that you're using is too strong, you can actually configure the dead zones and things, and this is where the pros come into play with this particular solution with the N64 as well as the other consoles that this thing can work on. What's cool about this, unlike other third-party solutions, is you can configure the dead zones and you can configure all your button presets. So if you don't like the way the buttons are laid out, you want to use a different device entirely, you can easily update this and set it up to work with whatever thing you want this to work with. Like I was saying at the beginning, you can actually pair this board up to another board and use it on an entirely different console that normally can't receive the ESP32 commands. If you want to push it a step further, you can pair a controller up to this, plug it up to an Arduino Pro Micro, and use the controller buttons to activate macros on your computer, or basically act like a wireless rubber ducky or a bad USB. But yeah, this thing is super cool and I recommend messing with it and looking through the various settings. There really isn't a question as to what you can hook up to here as long as it's Bluetooth and you have a config ready for it. But with that said, all we did was take a look at the N64 side of this thing. There are very many consoles that this project will work with. So I'm going to quickly open that up, click on Building Hardware 1, go into the cable build instructions, and in here we can look at the wiring diagram for all the other consoles we can hook up to. Like I was saying with the N64, it's just 3 simple wires that can basically just plug into your N64 if you wanted to. There are some things to note. If you want only one controller set up with this thing, it's always a good practice to pull the other pins for the other controllers high. What this means is instead of having IO pin left open, you connect it to 3 volts and vice versa. So if you only want the second player, you would wire up everything else to pretty much be 3.3 volts. Now with my particular build, I didn't do this step at all. It's kinda not even really necessary in my opinion. I had no issues and there's no like weird or wonky inputs happening with my particular setup. But like I said, it's always a good idea and good practice to pull those pins high, just like the assembly instructions state. Other than that, we don't need any resistors, diodes, nothing. You just wire up 3 wires to this thing. I'll have a video on screen of how I have mine wired up, and yeah, I know it's a pretty bad solder job and pretty bad proto board placement, but it was all I had at the time, alright? But hey, it works. One thing to note that isn't stated in this guide is the voltages the N64 produces are not that high, so you want to have as short of a cable as possible. If you don't have a short cable, it will have a hard time powering the ESP32. If you can't get it to work off the console itself, what you can do is disconnect power, only have your controller input, in this case for me it's just data, and ground go to the console. Then you can just plug the ESP32 in the wall. In my case, that is what I'm doing currently because like I said, my cable's too long. However, I did order some cables, they just didn't show up in time for my video, and I do plan to wire up all 4 controller outputs right to my console, so I can have up to 4 players using Bluetooth controllers on my N64. Well really, I think I covered just about everything. All that's left is to show some B-roll on screen and to maybe talk about the over-the-air update feature. So if you ever want to update your firmware for whatever reason, in my case I don't think I'm going to be updating mine really at all, it's pretty much perfect. All you'd have to do though if you did want to update is click on the over the update tab, connect your BlueRetro, same process as before. And I think I might have just unplugged mine by mistake and I did that, let me try again. Yeah, there we go. All you'd have to do to update this thing is to click on choose file, pretty much look for the .bin I believe that's in here. They will have instructions on the GitHub page, so I recommend checking that out if you want to learn more. All you'd have to do is download the file, hit update, and you're running the latest firmware. You don't have to plug it back in the computer ever again if you want to. But yeah, like I said, this will work for a wide range of consoles. I'll just quickly scroll through the list of things that you could set this up for. You could set up for the CDI, the Genesis, the NES, the N64, in our case that's what we did, Dreamcast, GameCube, and pretty much the list is endless. I plan to make one for my GameCube at some point in time. Well, in my case it's the Wii, I don't have a GameCube, but I think plugging it in there and then hooking up Xbox controllers to a Wii just sounds cursed enough that it's awesome, so I'll probably do that. And I really want to build the modified version. As you can see, there's no original Xbox option in here. There's a modded project that lets you use this on the original Xbox. And what I want to do there is run my original Xbox with the PS4 remote, because what's more cursed than that, huh? But yeah, like I said, that's it for the video. I'm going to let some B-roll play out, then end the video off here now. TTBK signing off. Peace. Incorporate more than one different battery or generator type of technology into this thing. Changing mouse controls to either the trackpad or a joystick will fix it. For those of you that have